Over 30 million copies. 17 printings in its first year alone. 90 years on the shelf, and it still outsells books written this season. In 2013, the Library of Congress called it the 7th most influential book in American history, ahead of nearly every novel you were ever assigned in school. And the man who wrote it was a pig farmer's son from Missouri, who got up at 4 in the morning to milk the cows, who failed at the one thing he actually dreamed of doing, and who, at the lowest point of his life, was sleeping in a small room at a Harlem YMCA, broke, out of work, with no idea what came next. He wasn't a genius. He wasn't a psychologist. He had no system and no credentials, nothing but a habit most people never bother with. He watched other people, closely, for 30 years, the way a naturalist watches birds, and he wrote down what he saw. This is the story of how Dale Carnegie learned to read people. And it begins strangely, with him walking away from the best job he ever had. Started in Missouri in 1888. Dale Carnegie, he spelled it Carnegie back then, is born on a farm near Maryville, into the kind of poor that a single bad spring can wash away. The family loses crops, loses ground. He grows up doing chores in the dark, up at 4 to milk the cows, then the long haul to school. By the time he reaches the State Teachers College in Warrensburg, he's one of the few boys too poor to board in town. And he notices things, the way a kid on the outside always does. He notices that the students everyone admires aren't the richest, and they aren't the cleverest. They're the ones who can stand up and talk, the ones who win the speaking contests, the ones who make a room lean in. So he sets out to learn how. He enters the contests, and he loses and loses and loses, and then, slowly, he starts to win. And somewhere in there, the question that will run through his entire life takes shape. Not how do I get good grades, but what is the actual skill that makes people listen to you? He doesn't have the answer. He just can't put the question down. After college, he takes a job that finally uses the thing he's been studying. He sells bacon, soap, and lard for Armour and Company, out of a territory based in South Omaha, Nebraska. Cold trains, small towns, a sample case, and a stranger to win over in every shop. And he is good at it. Not scraping by, good. He builds his patch into the #1 territory in the entire company. The farm boy who couldn't afford to board in town is now the best salesman Armour has. And then he quits. Not because he's failing, because he's succeeding at the wrong thing. The money is fine. The life feels empty. What he wants, what he's wanted since those college speaking contests, is to stand on a stage and move a room full of people. So he walks away from the best job he's ever had, the one he is winning, for something with no guarantee at all. Hold on to that, because it's the same nerve that writes the book later. This is a man who would rather take the right risk than keep the wrong sure thing. Most people do the reverse, their whole lives. Carnegie almost never does. He goes to New York and enrolls at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. He actually lands a part, the lead, a Dr. Hartley, in a touring production of a play called Polly of the Circus. He crosses the country with the show, and he hates it. The applause doesn't fill the hole he thought it would, and when the tour folds, the work simply stops. No company, no next role. He comes back to New York with almost nothing and takes a room at the YMCA on 125th Street up in Harlem. This is the bottom. Mid-20s broke, the sales career behind him, the acting dream dead, in a room he can barely pay for. By every visible measure, He bet wrong and lost. Except he is about to notice something inside that building that everyone else had walked straight past. He needs money, and there's one thing he can do: teach people to speak. So he goes to the YMCA's manager and pitches a public speaking course. The manager won't risk a salary on an unknown. "Fine," says Carnegie. "Pay me nothing. Just give me a share of whatever comes in." They settle on commission. Carnegie takes most of the net. The Y keeps the room. And the room fills. It fills with working men, clerks, salesmen, shopkeepers, who think they've signed up to cure their stage fright. Carnegie watches them stand to speak and lock solid. The sweat, the shaking hands, the sentence that dies halfway out of the mouth. And watching them night after night, he sees the thing underneath the thing. Their problem was never public speaking. Underneath "I can't give a talk" sat something larger and unspoken. I can't make people respect me. I can't make my boss listen. I can't walk into a room and have it go my way. What these men were starving for wasn't elocution. It was confidence, and the ability to handle other human beings. So he stops teaching only speeches and starts teaching that. And the class detonates by word of mouth. One full room becomes many, in city after city. He has stumbled onto it, in a borrowed room at the lowest point of his life, the one subject everybody needs, and nobody is ever taught: other people. To teach the class, he wants a textbook, a practical book on how to deal with people. He goes looking for one. He searches the libraries, and it isn't there. Shelves on grammar, shelves on rhetoric, and essentially nothing on the everyday art of handling another human being. So he writes his own, though writes is too fast a word for what actually happens. He builds it, over years, the way you'd build a legal case. He collects the real results his students bring back from their jobs, their sales calls, their marriages. He reads everything he can find on people who were magnetic with others. He pores over Lincoln. He studies Roosevelt, hunting for what they did that ordinary people don't. The book grows out of that classroom for the better part of 24 years, tested every single week on real people with real problems. By the time it finally becomes a book, it has already worked on thousands of them. It isn't theory, it's a field report. In 1936, Simon & Schuster publish it. A modest run, modest expectations. By some accounts, Carnegie figures it might sell a few thousand copies, mostly to his own students. Within 3 weeks, it has sold 70,000. It goes through 17 printings in its first year. 250,000 copies in 3 months. 1 million within 3 years. More than 30 million by now in almost every language there is. The Farm Boy's Field Notes have become one of the best-selling books in the history of the printed word, and in 90 years, it has never once gone out of print. He'd bet right again. The hunger he first saw in that YMCA classroom wasn't unusual. It was nearly universal and almost completely invisible. So what did he see, watching all those people for all those years? One idea underneath everything else in the book. It's this: when you deal with people, you are not dealing with creatures of logic. You're dealing with creatures of emotion, touchy, proud, steered by vanity, and driven, nearly all of them, by one deep and constant hunger: the need to feel important. We like to believe we're moved by reasons. We are mostly moved by how we're made to feel. That's the whole foundation. Every technique in this book, every story we're going to walk through in this series, grows from that single root. And it's why the man who found it wasn't a scholar or a saint. He was a salesman and a failed actor who paid very, very close attention to what made people open up or shut down right in front of him. Which is why the very first lesson in the book isn't a clever move to use on somebody. It's a warning, about the most natural, most satisfying, most useless thing every one of us does to other people. The thing we reach for the instant someone is wrong. Next time, why you should never kick over a beehive.